We've done it, Darth Joe. The financial system is mine. All of it. Chaos festers in markets, Darth Joe. But chaos precludes harmony. Harmony demands order, and only power can bring order to chaos. Only power can bring harmony. Only power can quell the tempest of finance. May this law let us reign over a modern financial system where my iron fist, Joe, shall guide the invisible hand. This is a new financial order. Now, let us rule over it. So, first question, do you think we should cut rates? I'm thinking 25 points. The numbers came in a little soft on unemployment. What do you think?
At least 25. I'm with it.
Well, yes, I like where your head's at, Darth Joe. Can you imagine Emperor Palpatine doing bureaucratic house chores? That always kind of makes me laugh. He's like, do you think he still uses that voice in staff meetings? These revenue figures are too optimistic, and then just starts like choking someone out.
There's a really funny stand-up routine about how Darth Vader has to go to the cafeteria and just like complaining to everyone, and all the trays are wet, and he's like, with all the power of the Death Star, why can't we have any dry trays?
It's wet, this one is wet, this one is wet. Did you dry these in a rainforest? Why?
And it goes on. You got to watch it.
We got to go back to the days where you can choke some people out during meetings. Let's get into it. Let's get what do you want to talk about today? I definitely want to introduce to you this new, the draft of China's financial law. This thing is a banger. I loved it. Wow. There's some good stuff in here. Do you know anything about it? Did you read just first off?
No, I do not.
I came to this late.
Yeah,
I didn't see this when it first came out. It's almost like a constitution, if you sort of look at it, for a financial system. Remember a few episodes back where they talked about the 5-year plan, and they're talking about having a new modern financial system with Chinese characteristics? That's like this document. That's sort of how I read it. That's this document. It's short.
So this just came out?
So it was, okay, so that's a good transition. So this is a proposal. So it did kind of just came out. And so it was a proposal. It came back out in March 20th, and people had until April 19th. So that's less than a month ago to respond to it. Just even right there, just that process already is really interesting, because it definitely reeks of sort of taking an idea from the US. Sometimes it doesn't feel like they are taking them in earnest. It's almost just for show, or like just for the process.
Yeah, show for process. Like you said, request for comment. I instantly thought, what comment from who? That's what they do in America. They do these comment periods. It's like, do they really take feedback when they write these things? I don't think so, right?
Exactly. So, and like, we'll go through it and I'll provide some feedback, but I would be very hard pressed to say that anyone would raise a hand and say like, hey, maybe you shouldn't like do this, or like, hey, maybe this is a bad idea. I'm going to do it just for shits and giggles, and I'll sort of like show what I think maybe is wrong. But just to kind of juxtapose two things, they come out so perfectly. The proposal for this new financial law in China came out on March 20th. The day before that, on March 19th, the United States came out with its own request for public comment document on 3 proposals to modernize the U.S. capital framework. Do you remember that? And that one, so literally they're a day apart. And I just want to show you how incredibly different they are. First, the US, they gave them 3 months. There were 2 PDFs. One of them is over 1,200 pages long. The second one is 436 pages long. Okay. They are extremely technical. They have like mathematical formulas used to calculate like the exposure amount of netting set of eligible margin loans or repo style transactions. Only in small corners of big banks, there are individuals who are able to like understand and respond to this. Myself, for capital related stuff, not included. Like, I would need to do a lot of my own homework before I could start to break these kind of things apart. They're extremely complicated. And then what happens is, after those 3 months, the OCC receives those comments. They write a separate report, which is even longer, if you can imagine, that goes through and looks at all the feedback that they got. And then they try to explain the rationale for why that feedback was either not incorporated or why they adopted it, right? They just have to document this stuff. It's the process. Now, contrast that with what the Chinese thing has done. Their document is 33 pages long, and it's at an extremely high level. I mean, it reads like a constitution, and we're going to look at some of what's in it, okay? And the second half, which you already mentioned, is like, do we really expect the Chinese Wall Street to provide honest feedback? Question mark there. And then I would love to read sort of, if they did in fact adopt the Western approach to this whole thing, is there going to be a separate report which summarizes all the feedback and then argues like why some were and some were not adopted, right? I would love to read that. I don't think it's going to happen, but I could be wrong. So what do you say, Joe? You want to read this thing?
Let's do it.
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, I mean, page count alone seems like it's just for show. You really want to have a serious policy paper and it's not over 1,000 pages, please.
Yeah, right. Why waste our time? Come on. Yeah, so this is the English translation provided by Grok. And I got a couple of these comments highlighted that I wanted you to read, and then I will provide a little bit of commentary.
Sounds good.
If you don't mind, Joe, could you read this highlighted bit right here? Article 3. And this is, again, about 33 pages long. There's like 90 articles. A lot of them are very short.
Article 3. For the purposes of this law, financial activities refer to monetary and credit activities directly related to deposits, loans, insurance, securities, futures, and derivatives, funds, trusts, payments, and settlements, credit reporting, etc., engaged in by natural persons, legal persons, and non-legal organizations.
The big thing here is this is why it's called the umbrella. They're basically taking everything, all financial, anything that could smell a little bit like finance, and is bringing under this single document. Article 4.
Financial work shall uphold the leadership of the Communist Party of China, first and foremost. A centralized, unified, efficient, and authoritative leadership system for the financial work under the Party Central Committee shall be established. The central financial work decision-making and coordination bodies shall be responsible for top-level design, overall coordination, holistic advancement, and supervision of implementation of financial stability and development.
Imagine that if we wrote something like financial work shall uphold the leadership of the Republican Party. I mean, just like swap out the Communist Party of China with any sort of political party, and it sort of stands out how strong that language is. Financial work shall uphold the leadership. That's what it's there for.
Wow. Yeah. It just couldn't be more fundamentally different.
Okay. Here's an interesting one. Let me show you something in Article 12.
The renminbi shall be uniformly designed and issued by the People's Bank of China, includes physical and digital forms. People's Bank of China shall manage the circulation of the renminbi in accordance with the law. No unit or individual may endanger the order of renminbi circulation in any form. Oh,
did you catch that?
Yeah.
Which part?
Well, a couple things, I guess. I mean, physical and digital form, but I guess that's not too surprising. They've been talking about a digital renminbi for a while. But even that last sentence, no unit or individual may endanger the order of renminbi circulation in any form. It makes me think back to Scotty B and George Soros back in 1990. They saw it to be at odds with the official policy of the Bank of England with regards to the pound at that time.
I see where you're going with this. I just looked at this in the sense that the key word here is circulation. Like, when did any of that start to actually inhibit the circulation of this stuff? The order of the renminbi circulation.
Huh. I read that as just like monetary policy. I actually didn't pick up on that part.
The focus here was the physical and digital forms, which you zoomed in on. And the digital is just being like, okay, this is now official that, the China has a digital central bank currency. I think if they can get this thing up and running, they could maybe make a real push to be the global reserve currency. Hey, take a look at this next one.
Monetary policy and fiscal policy shall be coordinated to enhance the effectiveness of macroeconomic governance.
Yeah, the coordinated monetary and fiscal policy, which is definitely different from the U.S. approach. Warsh coming in is openly saying that we need to split up the idea of fiscal and the monetary stuff. He thinks that the monetary aspect of it should be completely independent from the fiscal side of things, which is sort of political, and the monetary policy should not be.
I think Warsh has come out in favor of more coordination between the Fed and the Treasury. Remember, like that was one of the things we talked about when he was first nominated. He had these past speeches talking about a Treasury Fed accord. So they last did this back in, I think, 1952 or 1953, splitting up monetary and fiscal policy. Before that, they were done together. But he also emphasizes, generally speaking, more fiscal conservative policies. He wants to shrink the Fed's balance sheet. I don't think he would want to do this for the purpose of the central bank monetizing the U.S. government's debt.
Okay. No, that's a good point. Those aren't like you're right. What Warsh had said during his confirmation speech, he's talked about buying all this debt, and the huge size of the balance sheet was fiscal policy in disguise. And that's what I latched onto. But you're right. That's a good point. All he's really referring to is the central bank buying a bunch of debt, which is, obviously just a small section of what the two things could be doing between the monetary and the fiscal side. All right. Fair point. That's good context.
We're so conditioned in America to say that monetary policy is independent of fiscal policy. Politically independent is effectively what that means. There's a lot of good reasons for doing that, but it's not like that's the way it has to be. And in fact, that's not the way that it has always been either. From Warsh's perspective, he highlighted the points about coordinating debt issuance with central bank operations. So that's doing both of them together, but he wants to do it for the purpose of reducing the balance sheet. So there's a lot of gray areas there.
Can you read this one?
Yeah. Article 19, party organizations of the Communist Party of China shall be established in financial institutions in accordance with the party constitution and relevant intra-party regulations to carry out party activities. What does that mean? Like designated committees of party members in each institution?
Yeah. I mean, talk about tightening the holds. Basically, it looks like the way I read it is the party shall be embedded in these financial institutions.
Yeah.
So like we got to remember that it's important to note that there are really only, quote unquote, 100 million members of the Chinese Communist Party in a country with a population of 1.4 billion. So it's really only, less than 10% of the, entire country is actually a Chinese Communist Party member. So like not all members of the government, for example, are in the Chinese Communist Party. Certainly most people in financial institutions, same thing. And so what they're saying is they're going to be like, we're going to put in an organization, a party organization within every single institution to make sure it's doing what it's supposed to be doing in a way. There are certain perks if you're in the party. You're sort of like, you get to go away for a couple of weeks, I think, of the year. And for almost like a big team building brouhaha thing they go on with like other party members, they'll disappear from the company. And like companies aren't super thrilled about that, but they have to just tolerate it. And like being part of the party is like you have to pay fees. There are, separate organs devoted to discipline of the government and the party. Those are two separate things. There is the National Supervisory Commission, the NSC, and then there's the Central Commission of Discipline Inspection. So the latter one is the one that enforces party discipline and that like investigates violations within the party and like the political loyalty and stuff. Whereas the former one is supposed to overlook government itself. Like they're two separate things. So like a really important distinction if you want to see like how power is sort of wielded. They're saying we're gonna embed, a group of these of party members in every single financial institution. How would you feel about that?
Yeah, I mean, can't make it any more explicit than that.
Yeah. Tightening the hold, tightening control over the entire financial industry.
I don't want to go on too much of a digression here, but maybe you have a concise answer for me. I never fully understood like what that meant being in the party or not. So it does seem a little counterintuitive. The party is in charge of everything, more or less, but less than 10% of the population is a member of the party. I just never really understood how that really worked. Like in America, we say almost all of the population is the Republican Party or the Democrat Party. It's not like
Well, are you registered?
Fraction.
Are you registered? I think that's the difference. Like, are you a registered Democrat or Republican? You don't have to say which one.
I think back in college, I think I did. I think I am, maybe.
So I'm not. If I'm I'm registered as like an independent. So like of all the registered voters, just looked it up. It's like 40% are registered in one of the parties, and it's like 20% registered Democrat, 20% registered Republican, and then the other 60% are registered independent or what have you. I think it gets a little bit more narrow if you start looking at how many people are voting in primaries. If you want to take that as a measure of just how politically active people are. I think most people are just are just apolitical. They just don't want to get politics into their life. The other thing is like, and I think C has mentioned this, that they don't necessarily want to have a huge party. They'd rather have a much like a leaner, thinner party, making sure the numbers, he wants to make sure that the number of people in the party are going up every year, but not by a huge amount. And it shouldn't get like over bloated and lazy or anything like that. All right, let's get to some of the good stuff. But Article 55, it says, in performing their duties in accordance with law, the financial regulatory departments shall have the authority to adopt the following measures in accordance with statutory procedures. So I think what 55 is looking at is like supervisors, so regulators. What kind of powers do they have? And here's just some of the bangers. 1, enter the premises where suspected violations have occurred to investigate and obtain evidence. You can review and copy documents and materials related to property rights registration, communications records, etc., that are related to the matters under inspection or investigation. Here's number 6. Inquire into information on capital accounts, securities accounts, bank accounts, and other accounts with payment, custody, or settlement functions of units and individuals related to the matters under inspection or investigation, and may copy relevant documents and materials. As a former regulator, I got to say there were a lot of things that we could do, including like enter the premises. I don't think we could just show up randomly. I mean, there was really a cordial relationship. You let them know months and months in advance that we're going to have this exam, that we're going to show up. We give you a list of documents that we would like to see, 30 days in advance. But there are some things that are listed out here that regulators really couldn't ask for. The only time you could start asking for this stuff is if you got like a court order. And that's really where the line is. That's where the sort of protection happens in between. And things here that we're related to is like communication records, for example. A regulator can't show up and just be like, give me, all your emails, give me all your, internal Teams messaging boards or something. No doubt that the other side, the bank, would protest and then start escalating it and stuff. The other thing that like regulators can't do and you wouldn't do is if they started to inquire information on like bank accounts and other accounts with payments. There's no way like a regulator could go in and start seeing like the balances of their clients. It would just be like a random account number if it ever got to be that detailed, which it almost certainly wouldn't. If I were to provide some feedback, so again, they did send this out as a proposal for feedback. One of the things I would say is maybe consider adding procedural safeguards, because I'm a little worried that otherwise bureaucrats and people within these regulatory agencies are going to abuse their power, and they can start putting pressure on FIs in all these different ways to do their political bidding. If I thought 55 was them investigating, so the regular supervisory work that happens periodically, 56 happens when they actually violated a law. And now what are the powers that the regulatory bodies have over the FIs? Some of this, it's just total control, basically anything. But it even goes, I think, beyond just total control of that FI. 56, where units or individuals violate laws, administrative regulations, or the provisions of the financial regulatory departments of the state council, the financial regulatory departments of the state council may, depending on the circumstances, yada, yada, adopt the following measures. I got to mention, like when it says just where they violate administrative regulations, every bank probably has an MRA or one.
Yeah, sorry. What's that stand for?
MRA, matter requiring attention.
Okay.
And there's an MRIA, which is called
Master Repurchase Agreement.
Oh, yeah, right. No, not that. MRA, that's a matter requiring attention. It's just kind of the lowest rung of a finding from a regulator. I think it's pretty safe to say that most, if not all banks have like at least one MRA. So what are some of the things, if they did find that they violated administrative regulation, can they do? Here's one. Restrict or suspend part or all business, stop approving new business, stop approving the establishment of new branches. Not too bad. I think the Fed can even do something like that. Here's 9. This is, I think, a huge one. Order major shareholders to supplement the capital of financial institutions.
Wow.
There you go. Wow. Whoa. They could basically just be like, put more money into the bank. Or just have to do it. Invest into this bank. Can't do that. Can the Fed do that?
The Fed
can anyone do that?
Obviously not, but
can judges do that?
No, you can't order to do that, but this is definitely a stretch. But there are specific credit instruments that are meant specifically to supplement capital. So this was a story whenever Credit Suisse failed, that these specific types of bonds basically went to zero before the equity even did. And so it's meant to supplement their capital. It's clear that, it was just in a dire situation. So all of that got eaten through very quickly. But no one ordered anyone to buy those bonds, of course. But functionally, it's a little bit like that, I think.
Okay. Looking at that one. Here's number 8. Order the transfer of assets or business. That's nice. Pretty sure you can't do that either. Now, this is just, we got to also draw a distinction here between them sort of breaking in administrative regulation and when they start going into resolution. Resolution is different. Like when the bank has failed and the FDIC takes over, then they can do all sorts of stuff. That's when they can sell the business and stuff. But this is them just violating a law or administrative regulation. They can also, number 10, order responsible shareholders to transfer equity within a time limit, return dividends distributed within a certain period, or restrict their shareholders' rights. Woo.
Yeah, definitely can't do that.
Definitely can't do that. This is a good one. 11, order financial institutions to discipline directors, senior managers, or other directly responsible persons who are directly accountable. Woo, can't do that.
Well, who's really doing the disciplining?
Yeah. Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, it's this regulatory body pointing to management and be like, discipline that guy.
Wow. Hey, we didn't do it. Your board did.
Wow. Can't do that in the US. Order the adjustment of directors, senior managers, or other directly responsible persons, or restrict their rights or recover remuneration or benefits for a certain period. Bam. There you go. Pay it back. I mean, when I say like this is just total power over this stuff, this is what I'm talking about.
That's what I was going to say. It's just so expansive. It's just like you can sum this up by saying we can do anything.
Exactly.
We can make shareholders do anything. We can make directors do anything. But it's that shareholder part that's actually pretty surprising to me. Like they can order. It says order major shareholders. So I think we're splitting hairs.
Oh, so you're okay with it then, Joe? I guess it's all right.
I mean, because in America...
Go ahead, Joe. Justify it. Yeah, here we go. Hold on. Let me get comfortable for this one. Go ahead. I didn't realize I was talking to a tyrant. Well, let's think about this.
I was going to say, you don't have, explicit state pressure put on major shareholders, but for high profile events, public opinion can pressure, major shareholders or other key people.
There you go. Sure. So let's go look at 67. So this is risk resolution, which in this case, the authorities can just totally take over the governing of the bank, right? So this is almost analogous to like the FDIC. When a bank fails in the US, they basically take over the bank and can start selling pieces of the bank. Something similar in China, if you can imagine, they have even more control. So they write here, the financial regulatory departments of the State Council may, depending on the circumstances, adopt the following measures to implement risk resolution. The first thing they say is they just point back to Article 56, which we just read, and everything you can do there. They, dispose of assets and liabilities, something like that. Basically anything, revoke business licenses, branches, suspend the right of early termination of contracts. 10, where systemic financial risks may be triggered during the risk resolution process, forcibly transfer equity. I don't know about you. That sounds pretty good. I mean, can they just give ownership to someone else? Is that what that means? So like maybe
forcibly transfer equity.
So like strong. My favorite. Those are like my favorite 3 words as Emperor Palpatine over here. Maybe for some feedback, clarify the process maybe around forcibly transferring anything. Wow.
Intentionally vague.
Yeah, exactly. I imagine like some of the feedback thing. I'd be like, hey, just point a note. This is giving a whole lot of power to the government. And the people writing would be like, yeah.
Yeah, and?
Yeah, it's great. Great. It reminds me of like that scene in The Fifth Element where like the doctor, they just got the hand of the guy and the doctor's talking to the general about like how all like the genetic ability that this thing can do. And the general's like, oh man, it sounds like a freak. And the doctor's like, yeah, can't wait to meet him. A couple other ones I wanted to mention. Article 85 is like, any country or region that violates the basic norms of international law, international relations, adopt discriminatory prohibitions, restrictions against Chinese citizens or organizations. And it goes on like this. If you read it, it's just the shot directly at U.S. sanctions and secondary sanctions. If, C needed legal cover for just quote unquote violating or ignoring U.S. sanctions, he's got it with this.
Right. And it's whenever we talked about this before with like China and Russia, in reality, acting in accordance to laws of the jungle, but they write, if any country or region violates the basic norms of international law, like that's what they're saying, that should you violate this, then we have the power to act, when they don't really care about violating them or not themselves.
93. Sino-foreign equity joint venture financial institutions, wholly foreign-owned financial institutions, and branches of foreign financial institutions established within the territory of the People's Republic of China shall be governed by this law. Bam. So like, what do we just cover here? I mean, we said that if they have any sort of little tiny law against them, the Chinese government, the governing bodies, basically have total control over these branches and companies. Again, all they need to do is find some tiny little thing that violates something, including like if they feel as though the director doesn't have sufficient expertise in the field. That's
anything.
like yeah. I mean, anything.
Yeah.
In my read of it, and hopefully I've convinced you of this, Joe, is just through regulatory, or if they have a quote unquote suspicion that there has been some violation, they get to investigate, pull all of the communications, all of the data about the account owners, right? Whoever owns the account, the Chinese regulatory bodies can just get it. They just have access to it at any foreign firm.
Wow.
If they feel as though if they did identify a law or a regulation that's been broken, then they also have the power to basically do whatever they want, as we showed earlier. I think this is just part of, Xi's playbook. He just knows how to consolidate absolute power over stuff. This is just like part and parcel for how to read this guy. And this is what it looks like. This is the nitty gritty of what consolidating power looks like. And it's like shocking. And, this is one of those things where it's like, if I was working at the administration, I would try to get the president's ear before next week when he goes and talks to C and is like, hey, I saw this law that you just sent out. WTF, No. What? Is that really what it's being used for? Or is that really what you can do? It's like, I can't do that. The president can't do that.
Just speaking of having that much power, it reminds me of what we talked about last week with Xi unwinding that acquisition of the Singaporean company.
Yeah.
Still don't understand how that works.
Yeah, maybe I haven't tried to find more details as to what the mechanism by which he can do that. But I'd be really curious to know what that would be. Other thing I'll say, I guess, just in terms of feedback, sort of my last final thing would have to be like when you write stuff like this and you're just giving so much, let's just call it what it is, just absolute power in the hand of a single organ at the top of this bureaucracy. You have to understand that there are people in there that's going to use it for their own ends. That does not necessarily involve, the greatness of China or the country or whatever. And even more so, when Xi leaves power, these tools of absolute power are going to still remain for the next person in there. And you don't necessarily know what they'll use it for. There's no counterbalance to this. I mean, it's absolute power. And I kind of think that he really does want to weed out corruption, I think, right? I think he's kind of quote unquote pure in that way, but he's not going to be there forever. But these tools are going to be remained left behind for somebody else to use and abuse. And that's probably my main point of feedback.
I guess maybe the question is that I was trying to get to earlier, maybe, is like, is there something unique to, his political ability that allows him to just reach so far? And if another leader tried, if they don't have the same level of, I don't know, what soft power, I guess, within the party,
charisma and stuff, I don't necessarily think there is so much of a thing. I think ultimately the power is held, mostly the extension of it is, and this is why I mentioned that Central Commission of Discipline Inspection. If you can disappear people, you'll have the power. That's it.
Like, what do you think are the fundamental differences between Xi and the previous president, for example, Hu Jintao? Because he,
I'm going to put a pin on that. I have actually the resource to figure that out, but I got sort of distracted. It's this. It's like a biography on Xi that goes like super in depth.
The more I just kind of think about it out loud here, like you said, charisma. Like you think about the Communist Party, like there's really three main figures. You have Mao Zedong, Deng Xiaoping, and now Xi. It's the other ones just, I don't know. Those three are just such towering figures.
But it was sort of be designed that way. Like after Deng Xiaoping came in, Deng really tried to make sure that the idea of just a single overarching powerful person like Mao wouldn't happen again. And it worked for a little while. And so you had these sort of nameless technocrats that just kind of, but as soon as somebody comes along that is able to like manipulate the system or whatever, after Hu Jintao left, and I'll put in a clip because I think I found it, of publicly Xi Jinping had, I think, the former premier president whatever removed from the meeting. He's sitting right next to him. You can see it. Xi Jinping's sitting there, like one of his, like this young guy, just like assistant or something, is over and is like tapping. I think it was Hu Jintao, the previous guy, to like get up and leave. And you can see there's some words exchanged between the two. Power games, man.
I guess just very briefly, the other thing that I brought up to you earlier in the week, and in the spirit of fiscal and monetary policy, coordinated or not, at the latest Treasury quarterly refunding statement, so every quarter they issue a public statement basically giving guidance on what kinds of bonds they're going to issue and in what size and at what time. They want to keep everything very well known ahead of time before they do anything. And usually it's very dry. There's not much going on. But this one, there was a new proposal in it that should the Treasury invest its excess cash into the repo market whenever it has it. So this really gets into the weeds very quickly about funding markets and what it means for the Fed's balance sheets and the monetary system in general. Opinions kind of out on should they do it, or if they should do it, what kind of impacts would it have? I think there's a lot of good arguments for saying that, there wouldn't really be much of any. But this way or that, it is technically another form of fiscal policy coordinating with monetary policy, because the Fed operates in repo markets. So now if the Treasury does it, and so the big question was like, when would they do it? Because it was posed as saying something like opportunistically raise more cash, earn more yield whenever repo rates get too high. That means the Treasury would earn some extra cash and bring down repo rates, basically bring down volatility, make them operate more smoothly. So from that perspective, that's kind of how it was pitched. And it sounds pretty good overall. But I think by definition, that is coordination between fiscal and monetary policy.
Yeah, I thought they decided they weren't gonna do it because it didn't make any economic sense. And this is another really interesting point, because when they zoom out and they say, yes, the Treasury today at the very moment can earn a little bit more yield, but if you zoom out and include the New York Fed and the remittances and stuff, it basically just washes out to a couple basis points, like nothing.
Yeah, it would be very small.
Because it is really interesting to hear about like how currently the roughly $1 trillion or whatever that the Treasury has at its bank account at the New York Fed is earning 0 interest. So they're saying, hey, why don't we lend this out and put our money to work? But they realized that as soon as they did that, it would go back into reserves, and that the Federal Reserve would have to pay basically interest on reserve balances. It would be like almost the same rate. And then whatever the Fed had to pay then means the Treasury would not receive in terms of remittance. So it would just get added back to this negative that the Federal Reserve has on its balance sheet. That number would go up. The Treasury would get less of that money in the future. And net, it's just a wash. I mean, we should go into a little bit more, I think, detail, because it's just really interesting to see like how our financial system works and how the plumbing works.
Mm-hmm.
But that was my understanding.
Exactly. And I think that's the main point, that if they do it or not, these things are so closely linked, it's not clear what the outcome would be. Like in one sense, if the Treasury is saying they're going to do this to try to reduce volatility within repo markets, they're going to increase volatility in the amounts that they're holding. And that has big implications for funding markets in itself. So it's almost just transferring one area of uncertainty to another. Net for the system, it doesn't seem like you're really going to be gaining much.
I guess the last thing that's sort of worth mentioning, I think, was that John Williams speech. So he's the head of the New York Fed that he gave on Monday, on May the 4th. I remember because there were so many Star Wars themes.
I was gonna say no less than
nearly
5 or 6 references.
5 or 6 he dropped references in there. There is no try. That's literally the name of the speech. Randy often needles me for using overly modern cultural references in my discourse. So he's already that's like the second sentence. He's already apologizing for what's about to come, which is just this wave of references. The living force, the labor market has shown conflicting signs. The next segment refers to as a disturbance in the force, and the price stability side, Fed's dual mandate. Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
He talks about bringing balance to the force, talking, I guess, about his the mandates, elevated levels of inflation, and then the labor market. He says, I can't help but end with my favorite quote from Star Wars universe: do or do not, there is no try. And then he ends it, may the 4th be with you. Wham. And then there was a huge standing ovation, hollering. I don't know. I didn't watch it. I just read it, but
yeah, John Williams specifically has always been kind of a weird guy. I don't know if you remember, Luke, but like whenever he joined the New York Fed, he went out of his way to talk about like how nerdy he was. I remember him talking about, I love Star Wars. My favorite band is Green Day. I just remember just thinking like, what are you talking? Like, fine. Okay. You like Star Wars, but that said, it is a lot different than the typical central banker, because
it was more fun, to be fair.
Yeah,
it was more fun. It was more fun.
And yeah, I mean, he was definitely enjoying it up there as he was talking.
Yeah. A wise Jedi master once said, "Always in motion is the future," and that is especially true today. The Middle East conflict has introduced and just slides right into the war in Iran. Sure. All right, man. Well, that's all I had for you today, Joe. Hopefully you learned something.
Absolutely.
This has been another episode of the Root of All Evil podcast. My name is Emperor Luke.
My name is
Darth Joe.
Darth Joe.
And we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.